How's everyone doing? Got some lovely New York summer weather for us on this Juneteenth. So nice to see all of you. I'm not going to take too much time before I bring out some of the people behind this incredible project that you all just got to watch. First, writer, producer, and director, Andre Gaines. How you doing, Andre?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Executive producer, Lena Waithe. Hi, Lena. Writer and producer, Valerie Edwards. And executive producer and Dick Gregory's son, Christian Gregory. Such an honor to be here with all of you today, especially after seeing such a remarkable life kind of brought back to life on screen. Dick Gregory's life is not one who I knew as much about as there was to know, and that's really shocking to me, given the job that I do. But watching this film was so illuminating, and the impact of Dick Gregory in entertainment and in our country is just almost immeasurable. So I'm so glad that you all decided to put your talent behind telling this very compelling story. Andre, how did you develop the idea initially, and why did you choose Dick Gregory to focus on?
Well, thank you, first of all. Kind of similar to what Lena was saying in the film, I kind of had a rediscovery of Dick Gregory in 2008 when Barack Obama first ran for president on the State of the Black Union that he did. And it was astounding because here's this man on the panel with literally the best and brightest minds of Black America on earth. And we've got Cornel West, you've got Al Sharpton, you've got Mr. Farrakhan, you've got all of these people, and here's Dick Gregory on a panel of all these luminaries, and he killed it. He was hilarious, and he was current, he was informative, he was interesting, and I said, I've got to do something. I've got to make a movie about this guy. And we really weren't ready to do it. I was shooting some other films overseas, and really the team and I, we weren't really ready to do it until about 2015. And that's when we first flew him out to Los Angeles. And he had been, asked many times to do things for the movement. I didn't think he totally realized what he was getting into, but we had a couple of phone conversations. He was probably annoyed by me talking to him so many times. But when he came out and he saw what we were doing, he was like, oh, this ain't no bullshit, you gotta call Christian. And that was the first thing we did. We called Christian and he said, okay, this is a real deal, let's get this thing going. And that's how we picked it up. That was 6 years ago, almost. July 2015 was when we started filming it, which is exactly almost 6 years ago. And now we're here to enjoy it with all of you.
Wow. Lena, what attracted you to the project initially?
Well, the legend, the man, the myth, I was always sort of obsessed with him, and I was just reading his memoir, which is beautifully entitled Nigga, and it's so beautifully written. He's so eloquent in the way he tells stories about his childhood, and I was just reading that just on my own, just wanting for my own knowledge to hear from his own mouth about what his life was like, and then this call came to us about this doc, and I was like, that's so crazy how the universe is sort of working in that way. And because I was wondering if there was something to do in the narrative space, but I think once I got a chance to see the cut that he had at the time, I just thought there was so much there. I love seeing the footage of him just sort of like talking comfortably with Martin Luther King Jr. and also talking comfortably in front of thousands of people, and just watching his evolution take place and his understanding of who he is in the world and what his role is to the community, to his family, to his people. And what I love most about him is that he represents what we can be.
Yes.
Like, he was never a pessimist. Even though he's seen so much darkness, he always believed in us. I think as a Black people specifically, but he believed in the promise that we've been given. And I know he still believes in us and that possibility. And I think that's what was so exciting, to be able to sit with some people today so they could see who he was and how he lived. And it may inspire us to want to live even more victoriously, because that's how he lived his life.
Thanks for that, Lena. Valerie, how did you come to the project?
I connected with the project on a more granular level. Number one, it's an underdog story, which really resonated with me when Andre approached me with the idea, just because at the time I was really at a crossroads in my own life. I had an 8-month-old daughter at home, and I had just gotten out of a really traumatic, violent relationship. So, of course, making the film about Dick Gregory was the last thing on my mind, but I did the research, and I was immediately intrigued by, his continuous willingness to insert himself in the midst of conflict on behalf of others. And at that moment, I had become an other. And so I had to make this film. I had to make this film for people who felt they were at rock bottom, people who felt voiceless, for all the women that, were in situations that were extremely dark and difficult. I felt like if I could make this film, then that would speak hope into their lives as well. So.
Oh, thank God you did. Watching this almost 2-hour film, it was so informative, but it almost hardly scratched the surface, given what an incredible life Dick Gregory had. What were some of the things you left on the cutting room floor?
Oh, well, we had to leave a lot on the cutting room floor. It was a struggle. It's part of the reason it took 6 years. It's like we had to leave probably, I think, at least 8 or 9 sequences on the cutting room floor in the edit room that we weren't able to fit in. There's a whole section of Dick Gregory running for president. He ran for president in 1968.
Yeah, he did.
Yeah, it's like a lot of people know this. They had fake dollar bills that could actually work in ATMs, and people were getting money out of the machines. It's impossible for us to be able to tell the full weight of that story, in this film. And so the idea really was to allow for some of the story to breathe. Where filmmakers and the goal of cinema in many cases is not only to inform, but to provide a poetry at the end of the day. And for Dick Gregory's life, which was very poetic in its nature, of this man who grew up with absentee father, a single mother, was born in the roughest year of the Great Depression, to ultimately ascend to someone who lived 9 or 10 different lives. We'd be very lucky if we managed to live one of those. So that was a serious challenge. We actually had a version of this movie that we finished. What would you say, Val? It's maybe like
2018.
2018. That's like a year after his death. And Robert Lipsyte, who's a co-author of Dick Gregory's first autobiography, called me up and he said, I actually recorded the interview I did with Dick Gregory in 1963 in this hotel room in New York, Hotel Beverly. Would you like to have them? And I said, what are you talking about? Of course I'd like to have these things. And he said, well, I have them. And he sent them out in his big 17-inch reels. And we digitized them and we listened to them and we said, you know what, this is a better movie. We've got to start over. And that's what we did. So we stopped everything, redid the entire film, and that's actually why part of the opening of the film was sort of the crux of the story, is that we wanted Dick Gregory to tell it in his own voice. That was the idea.
Wow. How much, well, I mean, you kind of just answered it, but I was going to ask, how much of the film did Dick Gregory get to see before he died? How aware was he of the progress that you all had made?
Is that for me?
It is for you.
I'm a little disappointed. I thought you were going to ask me what is my connection, how did the story come to you?
We all know that.
I was going to call my mom up here to better break that down. I would like to acknowledge my family.
Yes.
My mother, Lillian Gregory, is here. I know these seats are quite relaxed back, but if you just put your hand up or stand up, all of my Gregory siblings that are here, there's nieces, there's great-grandchildren and grandchildren. This is what it's all about. This is truly what it's all about. And so my dad was very aware of the film. As Andre pointed out, he participated in the early on, and my dad wasn't big on seeing these things all the way through. It was his life. And so when Joe Morton just beautifully depicted Dick Gregory off Broadway, it was kind of off-putting to my dad, and not in a bad way, but almost in a pinching himself kind of way. And he said normally they do these type of things for people when they have passed. And so he was clear on the love that humanity had for him, that people understood his contribution. He was clear. He was at peace when he transitioned. When he passed in 2017, it really slowed down things with the film. Andre and the whole team, Valerie, were so helpful at my dad's service. They provided so many clips. They recorded Miss Cicely Tyson for us, and she just delivered just a beautiful line. And he is, not to take anything away from Andre, but I feel like Dick Gregory himself really directed this. He was taking all of the difficult kind of crossroads we would come to, and we'd go to bed, we'd wake up, and the answer would be there for us, just like everyone was complaining about the heat. He gave us rain. He's the water man. He's making sure everyone's drinking their water. Okay. Now it's time to go, so it stopped. So no, it just is a true blessing, and he was aware of it, and he was excited about it.
Oh, that's so good to know. I've got another one for you, and that is, what was he like at home? I feel like there was always this kind of myth that he was an absent father, but what was the real story there?
Only reason I say not a myth was he would always say that himself.
Yeah.
But, he would always say, Jack the Ripper had a mother and father at home. Hitler had a mother and father at home. Just because you're home doesn't mean you're present. And so when my dad was not home, he was always present. My dad and mom did an amazing job. If I had an SAT exam, wherever he was, on anywhere in the world, he would call, he would check. And now mom was running point on that. She was making sure so they had a trust and a balance, as they say, opposites attract. They really complemented each other's energy. We didn't feel, I don't want to speak for all my siblings, but we definitely didn't feel like there was a void. And I frequently say this, my dad considered himself a soldier, not in a violent way, and almost like SEAL Team 6, he was out there dealing with ugly things so his children and the rest of the world could sleep comfortably at night. And he made it very clear. And this film, this 110 minutes here, beautifully depicts what that sacrifice was all about.
That's a hero right there.
And one thing I wanted to add to that is the interesting part about that, because I got that question a lot. I mean, there's 10 siblings, and most of the time when you hear these stories about comedians, especially musicians, a lot of times you hear these stories about them being absent for reasons that have to deal with their vices. That may be alcohol, maybe drugs, maybe addictions to gambling, maybe addictions to women, maybe addictions to all different types of things. But Dick Gregory had this addiction really to sacrifice. I mean, he had this addiction to liberation or addiction to freedom. And that might have taken him away from his family, but that had nothing to do with his ability to be a father not only to them, but also a father to the world. And I think that that's something we can really all aspire to.
Absolutely. I was so struck early in the film when we learned that he went from making, I think he said $250 a week to $5,000 a night. And then, the success of the Bahamian diet. You'd think that this would be one of the richest black men, black families out there. Like, how did he end up in such financial trouble?
Okay, let me answer that. So the film shows part of the story. It shows the Bahamian diet was incredibly successful. It was 2 tiers. It was, and some of the folks behind it are here today. The multi-level division of the Bahamian diet was mostly black folks, and my dad always wanted to, self-employed, self-made black millionaires. And so when Beechnut offered to pay $30+ million for the diet, as you heard Ed Bradley mention, my dad walked away from that deal. That never happened because he said he's not going to turn his back on all the black multi-level distributors who had committed to him. And so, we had 110 minutes, so we can't tell everything.
Right.
And so, as my brother Johanse pointed out, my dad, he always understood that wealth was not financial. And so just his sweat equity, his understanding of value of being loving and lovable, he lived the life. He would always say the universe will provide. And he'd say, you show me a person with 1 job, I'll show you a poor person. You show me a person with 2 jobs, I'll show you a real poor person. He was explaining that if you slow down, breathe, and allow what the universe has in store for you to come, you'll find your way. And he always did. The story about losing the farm, we had outgrown the farm. We were all in college. Virtually no one was home at that time. It's one of those things that later became such a blessing, and that's why it's important not to pray and meditate and ask for guidance and then be pissed off when the guidance is something that you disagree with. And so I consider my dad a spiritual trillionaire, and it never slowed him down, not 1 iota.
I love that, a spiritual trillionaire. So many of the issues that Dick Gregory was focused on all those years ago are still incredibly relevant today. From the diet to, mobilizing people to use their voices and their powers. What do you think that says as far as the impact that celebrities and people with platforms actually could do, with all of that recognition today?
My dad would always say, more. Do more. My dad in the 60s, there was no social media, so it was very easy for media to box you out. And so now you can straddle the fence. You look at the LeBron James, they're doing both. Dick Gregory didn't have that option. And quite honestly, I don't think he would have. He was so proud of being an activist first, I don't think he would have straddled the fence. And the wonderful thing, when he pivoted away from comedy, because he didn't want to work in venues where alcohol was being sold and cigarettes were being sold, it brought him to college campuses almost exclusively. And there's no more apt pupil or apt mind than when someone's, a teenager, 20 years old, developing. And the amount of folks that come up to us, Gregory's, and say, your dad gave my commencement address, your dad spoke at my school, is very touching and moving. I'm certain, more than just telling jokes and making money, the impact he had on humanity was significantly multiplied by the venues where he was serving.
Or that your dad, paid for their college education. You told me that multiple times. This was something that was happening on a frequent basis. And again, it wasn't losing money from just, terrible management or throwing it away on, alcohol or Lord knows what. It was actually giving it away, and that's a totally different thing. He's unique in history in the same way that Lawrence O'Donnell said at the beginning of the film. He's like one guy in American history, especially at that level of an entertainer that did such a thing.
Lena, you have spent a lot of time, I think, using your platform to raise awareness for so many important issues. What did learning more about Dick Gregory and what he was able to achieve, how did that color your perspective of what you and your peers stand to do?
I think we're direct descendants, of what he was doing. I think he was one of the first to use his platform and not be afraid to share his political views. Then it is so funny when you watch the old interviews, he's so controversial and they're wondering why he's gotten away from comedy. But the truth is he really was mixing both. The fact that he can make MLK Jr. laugh. He's not afraid to bring humor into the movement because in essence, it's ridiculous.
Right.
The fact that we could be seen as less than. The fact that someone who is othered can be treated as if they aren't a human being. And I think found that just so ridiculous that he could not address it. And what was great is that he forced the audience and everybody listening to him to kind of realize, yeah, this is a crazy thing. Like, but the truth is, just because you speak the truth doesn't mean that people will recognize it or digest it. Because he was speaking the truth back then, and we're still, and he'd be pissed if he was sitting here right now. So I think, I think that, you know, the work stands, you know, and the world is going to continue to be what it is. But I'm glad that we have a testament, we have a record that he told us the truth. He never lied about anything, and I think that's what we have to do. He also was a human being. He really, I love what he was saying about the people have this thing about celebrity and these people. He's like, but I'm also a human, and you can see that he was trying to figure out who he wanted to be while trying to be a leader, while trying to be everything to everyone. And I think that, but I think that's the price of the ticket. It comes with it, and I think that's what you have to do. It's like either ignore everything and just kind of just keep moving forward, but the truth is you cannot ignore what's going on, and you must speak about it.
Thank you.
Just to piggyback that, I always thought, you know, I always think it's interesting that everyone tells entertainers to stay in their own lanes, and obviously Dick Gregory did not do that at all. And he was able, just like Lena said, to blend his comedy, to use comedy, I think, to sort of cut his teeth, you know, and use that as a platform to then get involved in so many other lanes, right? He, would he have been so influential in civil rights had it not been for comedy? I don't know, but I definitely feel like comedy set the stage for him becoming such an influential activist. And then, you know, comedy was part of his arsenal. He weaponized comedy. And like she said, you know, he was able to make it bearable, make the struggle bearable. Like we saw in the film with Martin Luther King, with all these icons, he brought this likeness to it that I think was essential for, you know, the soldiers on the ground. Yeah. You know, to connect with everyone. So.
Wow, absolutely. All of you tell me what you learned about the warmth and the wrath of Dick Gregory, because we heard a few people kind of describe that sentiment. We'll start with Andre.
Oh man, it's a little dramatic. Yeah, no, you know, Dick Gregory had this uncanny ability to not only paint pictures with his words, but to also give you a whooping with his words. And he really did that like the very first time that I met him. I mean, we had a couple of conversations leading up to flying him out to LA. But when we sat him down to interview him, you know, he was just as fiery as you see there. And it was one of the most, if not the most difficult interview that I've ever had in my life. I mean, I've been, you know, producing movies and documentaries for a long time. And the reality was that kind of by the time he had to sit down with me, he's kind of annoyed at the world in a way, because we're kind of not doing everything that we should be doing. I mean, you know, I'm 41 years old. I mean, he was talking about being 41, and he did like, you know, 20 different things by then. He ran across the country, he's doing all types of stuff. And so I think that there was a certain level of kind of your old cantankerous uncle being a bit upset with you. But then I learned that that was like the rite of passage. That hazing, so to speak, was sort of part of the love that he had for you, in the same way that, you know, parents used to say, I whoop you because I love you, was kind of this along the same lines, because literally the next day, you know, we were back on track. We were perfectly back on track. And I remember being so enraptured with Dick Gregory before we sat down really for that interview, because he comes right up to you, he grabs your hand, he looks you in the eye, he says, how's your family? How are you doing? How's your mom? He acts like he knew me. And that had an effect on me to this day, where I actually, you know, kind of use that with new people that I meet in a way that is kind of commonplace. And so that was sort of the, you know, the warmth and wrath part of it, is that when there were certain things he was not pleased with, he was going to let you know about it, but then he also was exceptionally lovable. I mean, this is the loving and lovable part of it that Christian always talks about. And I just fell in love with the man. I mean, he was just so like easy to get along with and understand after a certain point that you just wanted to hear him talk all day long.
So cool.
Chris, do you have anything to add to that?
I just want to say, because of the venue, Andre's given the PG-13 version of how this all went down. It was probably 3 months before I even knew Andre had a name. It was very colorful language to describe the gentleman who was attempting to make this documentary. And it was a pleasure and joy to untangle it and get things straightened out. Different generations, they communicate differently. I frequently say no country for old legends. We need to do a better job holding up. I mean, our celebrities, they age, they deal with dementia, they deal with, I mean, it's just their persona, and limelight gets heavy. And it's important that we prop these folks up with the same love they've given us to reciprocate that and give it back. But he had, yes, absolutely. And it's such a blessing to see the team that was put together. You know, it's Andre, it's Valerie, then Lena and Kevin Hart. Just, you know, when Andre called me up excited, it was like, you gotta listen to the track. We're gonna play out with the credits. And it's, you know, and it's, he didn't tell me initially that it was Black Thought. And we are Black Thoughts, plural, sitting up here. So it was such a good fit, because my dad would always say he was super black. And when he said super black, it wasn't about complexion. It was about his attitude, his love for his people. And this group is super black. You know, this group is super black. It's a beautiful thing. We're holding folks up in love. But my dad would sometimes say, you know, Andre's not a master communicator. And I said, I would beg to differ. But then when Lena sent out the message, we were rocking shorts tonight, and Andre came in a suit, I said, he's still not listening. So, no, it's just a blessing, and I want to thank
get the
all
memo,
of you.
sorry.
Yeah, thank you.
But one thing I want to acknowledge here, really, and especially, you know, as it relates to Lena and her platform, is that, you know, so many times when we make these films, the audience gets the reward of seeing the finished product. They don't know all the work that goes into it. But every name in this movie, all of the names that were listed there, and especially Lena being so supportive from the very beginning once she started to come on to this and use her platform to amplify it. And Christian, you know, this is not like an executive producer vanity credit. I mean, this is something that was more than extremely earned. And I think that the realities of it is that for a project of this magnitude, you know, the challenge, I get to, you know, have myself applauded as the director, but there was no way that I could have ever done any of this without the help of Lena, without the help of Val, Christian, and my whole team that's sitting in the audience, and the Gregory family especially today. So I want to give them a round of applause.
And you know, Andre, we got to thank you for your patience, for your diligence. You know, thank you for staying in it. You know what I mean? Because it's so interesting. I watched a great documentary about Gordon Parks yesterday in terms of how he captured us with his camera. I think Dick Gregory captured us with his comedy. And they talked about with photographers, you have to earn your subjects' trust. You have to make them feel comfortable. And I think you did that. You stayed in it, you were patient. And by the time it got to me, I could see the time and energy you put into it. And this was someone that I really admired and looked up to, and I know a lot of people didn't know enough about him. So I'm just grateful to everyone on this stage, because you all got to see that this is an American hero. And he should be treated as such and respected as such. And I'm just grateful that everybody's going to get to learn a little bit more about this icon that we didn't deserve, but we got anyway.
Thank you.
And sadly, we have to wrap, but that is a perfect segue into my last question, which is, you know, when we have real heroes, I don't think they want a thank you. I think they want us to carry on their legacy. And because of this film, so many more people will have an opportunity to do that, because they will learn this legacy. So how can we as viewers, as the public, as a people who have just been reminded of what we're capable of, how can we honor Dick Gregory's legacy going forward?
Well, I think we're at a moment right now where people are suddenly aware. People are looking around and, looking for a chance to see what they can do about the injustices that, that we face in this country. And I think Dick Gregory, the main message from this film is to be that change. If you want change, it starts with you. Be that change in whatever capacity that means, right? So we're always praying and we're meditating, but we essentially are the answers to our own prayers. That's kind of
Thank you.
I would say that, really, the next time you see a protest, go join it. Instead of, especially places like New York, DC, where people walk around a lot. LA, we just kind of stay in our houses until we're invited outdoors. But if you see something, go join it. The next time you get one of the pesky emails from any organization or a politician that really believes in social change, don't ignore it. Donate $5, donate $2, put it up on your social media. I mean, these are types of things that we can do, little things. And if everybody does those little things, then a whole voice will be amplified as a result of it. And no, we're not all Dick Gregory. We can't do what he did. I mean, this was Superman, for Christ's sake. I mean, it's to try to do something like that, you're gonna fail. But at the end of the day, you could do one of the things he did. You could try to do two of the things he did. You could try to get your friends to get off their asses. You can try to get your family to get off their asses. And one other thing I would say is, especially as it relates to voting. I mean, just most people don't vote and don't exercise that right. So it's all of these little things that we can do as people to help amplify the legacy of somebody like Dick Gregory.
Absolutely.
Just lastly, I'll say, Dick Gregory didn't have a roadmap. You've heard it in the film, you've heard it here, born in 1932, Jim Crow, St. Louis, just everything was insecurity, housing insecurity, food insecurity, no love insecurity. The love that he described so beautifully, that his mother was able to provide for him, to nourish his hunger pains with tactile stimulation in words. Dick Gregory did not have a roadmap, but he left us an incredible map. We have no excuses. We all need to simply do better and do more.
Thank you so much for that. Thank you all for joining us today. Thank you everyone up on the stage. Such an incredible film. Tell your friends about it. Support it when it comes out on Showtime.
July 4th.
July 4th.
Yeah.
Independence Day.
I know, right?
The other
Premiere on
Independence Day.
Juneteenth and debut on Showtime on July 4th. We couldn't have asked for a better rollout.
Yeah.
Perfect.
And a great partner. Shout out to Showtime.
Yes, thank
Really
you, Showtime.
incredible.
Shout out
Thank
to
you.
Showtime.
You know I love you, Showtime.
Absolutely.
Okay, I'll get out the rain.
All right, yeah.
Get home safely, folks.
Thanks, everybody.
Wow.